Hi. So I'm Stephan Reese. I'm the Executive Director of the Interactive Art Collection, a 501c3 nonprofit art museum. Our big flagship exhibit is the Art of Nintendo Power, which is directly next door, so I don't have a visual aid. I brought you a museum. That is my visual aid. I'm also very proudly a single father of a 7-year-old girl who's amazing. Her name is Piper. I have 3 dogs. One of them is a 110-pound Great Dane. And I have worked in the, as of 2023, I will have worked in the video game industry for 20 years. My first game was Fairly Odd Parents for the original Xbox. The most recent game that I just shipped is The Quarry by 2K, so please play it. I'm very, very proud of that game. So yeah, I super didn't expect this to turn out, which is great. And so I thought I'd just start with an introduction as to kind of how I started the foundation, and kind of cover some most popular questions, and go from there. And we can, anyone who has any questions additionally to that, we can grab the mic. So it was actually in, we're gonna get real personal real quick. So 2019, the day of this show, my wife passed away. And so that was kind of a turning point for me. So to where it was, I had been collecting a bunch of different things. I had 9,000 games, but collecting some more kind of historical items like original art, like signage and trophies and all that kind of thing. And I'm like, what am I actually doing this for? And look, collect how you want to collect, but like I had some like art collector friends who were like, oh yeah, my collection's like literally sits in a closet, so that it like can't see the light of day, and like God forbid anything happened to it. And you know, I just kind of kept thinking about it. I'm like, you know, if I were to share all of this art and something were to happen to any one of these pieces, like if let's say I shared it for the next 30, 40 years, which is my plan. I would love to retire into doing this full time. I work in the game industry now, so I can do this. This is my life's work. And so, you know, I thought if something happens to any one of these pieces in the service of sharing it for the next 40 years, so be it. Like that's worth it to me for something to those maquettes, for instance, super fragile. Something is gonna happen to one of those one of these days, and I'll fix it, and it'll be fine. And as payment for that, I'll get to share it with all of you for the next 30 years, which to me is totally worth it. So that's sort of how the foundation spun up. I like to say, I work very closely with the Video Game History Foundation. I like to say I do all the things that Frank and Kelsey don't have the room to do. Yeah, so I thought I'd talk a little bit some actually fun stories, because I think a lot of people will want to know sort of how this art is had, and or how it's found. And a lot of it is just finding people. It's never about, and you can kind of use this as collecting anything that's not for sale. It's not about finding a thing. It's about finding a person and making that connection and building that relationship to the point where it's like, okay, my goal is not to come away with this piece of art. My goal is to make that person know that when the time comes, I am the best place for this, right? And if you structure it that way, first of all, you'll be way less shady. Like, but then even if you come away with nothing, you'll still have built an amazing relationship, amazing connections. Like I have found art where it wasn't from the initial connection. It was but that person knew a person who knew a person who knew a person, and had I not treated that person well, then none of that would have happened. So. None of what I do is magic. It's not difficult. It's incredibly time-consuming. But when you have a name, because most of it starts with a name, right? You find John Smith, which, oh God, when it's John Smith, it's awful. Because that's like 3 months of me contacting every John Smith I can find. But you really just usually starts with a name, and you know, it's not like, oh, do you have a thing? It's like, well, just tell me about your time in the industry. And because a lot of times people will be like, oh, well, I don't remember anyone's name. And I'm like, that's fine. Let's talk about your day. Let's talk about whatever. Like, let's just talk. And then organically they'll be like, oh, I remember this guy and I remember this person. And, you know, it's like, so those things kind of come organically out of that. That habit, so half of those covers were painted by a man named Dan McGowan, who is Rose McGowan's father. And so I found him, he passed away in 2010, but I had found his obituary, and it was like, you know, he had many children, bless his heart, and it said, you know, leaves behind so-and-so and so-and-so, and Rose. And I'm like, there is no way that that's Rose McGowan. And so I hit her up on Instagram. And I was like, there's so many tiers of like impossible, right? It's impossible this is her. It's impossible that she's gonna respond to me. And so sure enough, she's like, yeah, that's my dad. Here's my stepmother's phone number. And so I was able to rescue all of those covers. Those were sitting in an attic forever because Dan McGowan was an amazing artist, but he was also a commercial artist who did everything. And so at the same time he was painting those, he was doing like herbal essences tea boxes and like, you know, Downy paper towels and just like, you know, detergent and like, that's one of the most interesting things. It's like, this was a job for most people. Like they was just like, and that's why like a lot of those maquettes have been destroyed, and like being able to find what we did, right? Like that the Dr. Wiley shit that's next door. The fact that that's larger than a football and still exists is crazy. Because you know, I have photographs of like the Maniac Mansion. That's like a 4 foot tall piece of polymer clay. It was like 300 pounds. And so, of course, they didn't keep that. Nintendo wasn't Nintendo, right? It was just, you know, it was taking up space in my studio. So, of course, I'm going to photograph it and throw it away. So, so being able to find, you know, what we found is incredible. Because again, this is really just kind of a job for a lot of these artists. And you know, I've mentioned before, but the reason why I don't put people's names on plaques in all those frames. A lot of people don't want to be bothered by us. And you know, they've spent the last 30 years of their, you know, retirement essentially, just comfortably living in peace. And I give the option, right? It's like, you know, this is, if you would love to be known, if you want to be known, I would love to tell people, I'll shout it from the mountaintops, you know, I'll tell them all about you, but this is what you can expect. You know, a lot of people are going to blow up your inbox, right? Is that something you're interested in? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is no. So it's not, I think I have a lot of like younger artists who are sort of hungry to make it in the industry, who are like, how dare you not show, you know, how dare you not tell people the name of this artist? And, you know, and it's like, this is their choice. I don't, you know, if they want to be known, then by all means, but typically they don't. I'm just kind of rambling, I'm sorry. Story of the first cover. A lot of people want to know about issue number 1 and whether or not, because they see all the clay in the room and want to know the story of that first cover. It no longer exists, but this is what happened. So that cover was made by Joan Gatz, who was she's actually an Academy Award-winning filmmaker now. But at the time, she was a sculptor for Will Vinton, that animation studio. So like California Raisins, all of the claymation in Moonwalker, that was that studio. So while those are made out of polymer clay, which is like a baked clay, that piece was made out of oil clay, which was stop motion clay. It never dries. And so it was in a fish tank in Gail Tilden's office, who's the editor-in-chief of the magazine. He was in a fish tank in her office. And you know, sometimes you'll like go away for the weekend, like with corporate jobs, you'll go away for the weekend and they'll move your office, they'll bring in a moving company and move your office, and you'll come back and your office will just be in a different place. They did that, and the moving company dropped the fish tank. And because it was oil clay, just the impact was enough to completely flatten it. So it didn't break. It's like it's a flat piece of clay. Sadly, there's stories like that that it breaks my heart. And honestly, that's the kind of stuff that keeps me up at night. There's a voice in my head saying every minute that you're not finding something, it's being thrown in the garbage. As much as people want to think, and this is just for all things, just general knowledge, your children don't want your things. And if you're out there saying I'm collecting for my infant son, you're not. You're collecting for yourself. It's a lie. And there certainly have been cases where Wendy Salvatore, she was the paste up artist for the magazine for the first 90 issues. And when I say paste up, the way that those pages, the interior pages, were made is someone was actually pasting them together with a glue stick. It was a literal paste up, and then they're photographed. So all those Mega Man maps you see, that's someone taking a picture of the television and pasting it together by hand. And that's why if you look about every half an inch, you'll see Mega Man somewhere in the frame, because he has to be, because they were taking a photo of a television. And she had thousands of pages of these paste ups, and she showed them to her kids one day, about a year before I met her. She showed them to her kids one day, and she's like, "Isn't this great? This is what Mom did. This is, this put braces on your teeth." And they're like, "Yeah, that's not, sure, great, Mom." And she recycled all of them. So that's what keeps me up at night. So yeah, your kids don't want any of your things. Sorry to be depressing about it, but that's true. What else can I tell you? I'm happy to take questions. I seriously was not prepared for this many people. I was like, yeah, 5 people are gonna show up, and I'll just kind of sit in the crowd, and we'll whatever, ask me whatever you want. And then I'm like, oh, this is not gonna work for that at all. And certainly I am going to be in the hall next door every waking moment that is not right now. So, and it's certainly easier to talk to a specific painting when I'm standing next to it. What other story do I have? Oh, yeah.
What's one of your favorite pieces we can check out today?
Love the Castlevania 4 oil painting. That's actually, that's a fun story too, because the artist hates that painting. People ask me how much does it cost to collect art? And it's well, it's kind of asking me how much does a car cost, right? There's so many variables to it. That piece in particular, he hated it so much he charged me shipping. For those not familiar with the cover, it's Simon Belmont swinging through the darkness on a chain. And if you look, his left leg is really oddly shaped. It's very deformed. His arms are not the same length. He's lit by 4 different angles. And that's because originally the bottom half of him has been repainted. So he was originally sweeping into the frame. There's an area in the lower left-hand corner where it says on the cover, Super Castlevania 4. There was very little information given to the artist, and oftentimes it's the case, like the Secret of Mana dragon that looks nothing like Flammy. So he was sweeping into the frame this way, and Gail Tilden gave the feedback, that's where the text is going to go, you're going to have to repaint him. And so he did, in whatever way he possibly could to fit him into the frame, and so he kind of doesn't look very anatomically correct. So yeah, again, the artist hated him so much he charged me shipping. That is kind of the case too, because going back to it's been 30 years. So even though we're oh my God, this is amazing, a lot of these people are I'm not even the same person I was when I painted that. I've gone through 3 different art styles since then. Yeah, so a lot of this work, going back to them not wanting to talk to people, they don't want to be reminded of a period of time in their life that was oh, I was a student, I just took this job because I needed the money, that kind of thing. Yeah, that's. Go ahead.
So, sort of speaking of that, I've been curious, were the artists required to sort of source their own reference material, or was it provided, or did it sort of depend on the particular game they were doing, or?
It depended on a lot of things. So the question was whether or not the artist had to source their own reference for the art. A lot of times the Nintendo would have said, hey, like, we'll send you like a pre-release copy of the game, or like we'll even like, you know, have someone record it on VHS and we'll send it to you. Do you have any interest in that? Most of the time, they didn't want to be bothered with that. They weren't gamers, they didn't really care. They were just like, I'm just doing, again, going back to the, this is just a job. They didn't care. So some of the stuff is a little bit off model. There's actually there's a Cyrax cover in there that was so off model they didn't use it. They used a screenshot. Like, that's got to be really off model if they're going to use a screenshot instead of your original art. Yeah, that was oftentimes up to the artist. Same thing with medium. The magazine really didn't dictate what the art was, because there was so much art, and there was like multiple ways you could be an artist. You could either work for Nintendo, you could be a freelancer with an ad agency, you could be an independent contractor. So there was a lot of different ways to become an artist in Nintendo Power Magazine. But and they were doing so much art, and it was so fast that they didn't really tell them, you know, give them guidelines for art direction, which is why, and the actual art, there were art directors on the magazine. And they would get mad at me for saying this. But the lack of art direction in the magazine gave it this really cohesive feel. Like, it made it feel like it was something me and my friends could have put together. I have a Spy vs. Spy piece that was drawn in crayon, and it got published. You turn the page and it's like a fine artist landscape, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, the quality of art ran so, the gamut ran so incredibly that lack of cohesion really made it feel cohesive. Yeah. Yes?
Why didn't they just use the concept art?
Why didn't they use the concept art? Most of the time it was because it was faster for them to draw it themselves. Even if they were going to use that same art. I have one piece that I think is actually from, so I have a Clay Fighter manual piece, it's not here, but it's Taffy throwing a punch. And that came from the manual for the game. That actual piece came from the manual for the game. But most of the time they would have someone redraw out of speed. So like that, all that, the Cell Mega Man art that's in there, that's not, it looks like the Japanese manual art. It is not. It is an American repaint of the Japanese manual art, because it was so much faster and safer for them to have someone locally repaint something than to have Capcom go, or for them to reach out to Capcom and say, hey, can you like mail us this art from Japan and maybe it'll get here in a month, or it'll just get lost at sea forever. Because again, there was no, like, very, very little happened digitally. Even like the Howard and Nestor stuff, I'm trying to figure out a way to display it properly for people. But I have a lot of faxes. It was faxes between the artist and the writer of Howard and Nestor, and they were just doing notes and revisions via fax, because that was like the best that they could do. Because again, this is like at a time that there weren't even like they couldn't do screenshots, taking pictures of the television, because there was no, they couldn't even do screenshots. So email was not a thing. Yeah. Yes.
Do you have anything exciting to say about the Super Metroid comics that were in the 3 issues at one point?
So the question is whether or not I have anything exciting to say about the Super Metroid comics. I know where it is. I know where all of those pages are. Also next to them is the Star Fox comic. Benimaru Itoy is the artist for both of those. He also did like an Earthbound manga. He was a lot of these artists, the kind of, especially with the Japanese artists, the difficulty is that they used really prolific artists. And it's like the Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past comic was done by Ishinomura, who created Super Sentai. So there's like an Ishinomura manga museum in Japan that has all that art, which, fine, I understand I can't have everything. It's fine. It's fine. But like, that breaks my heart particularly because that stuff was only published in the States. So it's sitting in Japan without like really, like that museum doesn't like bring it out very often because there's no appreciation for it because it was only an American publication. I mean, the art is beautiful, and we've been talking about it forever. And that's one of those things where I go back to just making sure that there's a plan, right? Mr. Toy is single, unmarried, no children. And is in his mid-80s. So like I want to make sure that we've got a plan for that. And if it's me, great. If it's not, fine. But like let's get a plan put together. But that's a very delicate thing, and especially when there's a language barrier and cultural, very very particular cultural challenges as well. So it's an ongoing process. I do have all of the art for the, they did a Metroid Prime comic. The Dreamwave artists did a Metroid Prime comic. I have all of that. I will say, by the way, this is something that we're working on with the foundation, because Frank and Kelsey run the museum. But next year's the 35th anniversary of Nintendo Power. So I have ready to go, I have twice the number of frames that's in that room. And then I have another 200 pieces on top of that need to be framed, which is probably around $35,000 worth of framing. So that's slow going. But I would really love, and in 2019, for those of you who were here, I did the gameplay counselor exhibit. That was mine. And which is intrinsically linked to Nintendo Power, obviously. So like I want to do everything next year. That's my goal. Don't quote me because we're working it out. But I would love to take over that whole room or as much of it as I can next year, and really just kind of go for broke on the display. But yeah, we're working on the Super Metroid stuff and working on the Starbucks stuff. So much of it is it's a very long game, right? Where sometimes you'll just kind of plant the seed and walk away, and you won't hear from someone for 5 years, and then a box will show up. That's how I got an NWC cartridge. So I had met again, doing the counselor exhibit, I've talked to a lot of gameplay counselors, and I talked to this guy, and he said, a lot of it is a box in the garage. You want the box in the garage. Like I've actually learned to, so like in corporate America, oftentimes you will clean out your desk on your last day, and you'll put it in a box, and you put it in the garage, and you will never look at that box again. I have 3 of those boxes myself for my own stuff. And so that's been like when I'm talking to, and feel free to use this as a hot tip, when I'm talking to ex-employees of whatever company, I will ask about that box first. Like, do you have your last day box? And because that also, you get really interested in weird stuff like half off coupons to restaurants that don't exist anymore. Or I have like 401k information from people, right? Which, from a context perspective, it's helpful from a historical perspective. So, where was I going with that? I had a point, but whatever. We'll get there. We'll get that. Yes.
You mentioned a bit about how it could take like 5 years. What's the longest, or I guess what's the hardest thing that you've ever had to get in terms of like time or resources spent?
Probably 5 years. Actually, so that's what I was going to come back around to. So anyway, there was that guy. Thank you. There was that guy who had the box in the garage, and so he said, "If I ever find it, give me your address. If I ever find it, I'll send it to you. The box in the garage. I don't know what's in the box in the garage." And so 5 years go by. A box shows up on my doorstep. Still have not talked to that guy again. And in that box was 13 prototypes and an NWC cartridge. I felt bad about that. So we ended up working it out where I was able to rehome that NWC cartridge. he got the full amount, and then my commission was basically the rest of the contents of that box. Felt much better about that. But yeah, it's, 3 years or less, I usually feel like I'm doing pretty good on a thing. But again, like, it's not, most of the time, it's not like, hey, I know where this thing is, and in 3 years, we'll talk more about it. It's more of like I have a box in the garage. Like, you'll find a person who has things and somewhere, and they will, they'll hit me up years after, and who knows what I'll get. Yeah?
Alright, so when it comes to Nintendo Power covers, I'm mainly interested in like the fan art pages that you have in the issues.
Oh, the envelope art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
My
do
favorite
you
stuff.
think like some of those are now?
You ready for a sad story? Because I know where most of those are. They're not where you want them to be. In 2010, keep me honest, people in the room, they bulldozed the Redmond building, the original Nintendo headquarters. And the story I am told was that there was they cleaned out whatever they wanted to clean out, and then there was a sort of a period of time where they were just like, whatever you want, just go in there and take it. In the call center, which is the counselors and the correspondence folks were the ones who picked most of those pieces of envelope art, and then they went up on the wall. The way that I got that art is someone ended up taking, as the wrecking balls were coming in, took a bunch of art off the wall, and then found me years later. It's no accident that I use Art of Nintendo Power as my exhibit name. It's very good SEO. If you Google Nintendo Power art, you will find me before you find Nintendo. So yeah, that's where most of that envelope art came from. I have, so presumably, the rest of it got knocked down with the rest of the building. And considering that they were getting tens of thousands of submissions a week, that makes me real sad. I have 2 more full issues like that. That's what makes that I mean, it's all special, but like what makes that piece special to me is that it's everything from that issue. So I have 2 more issues that are like that, and then I have a bunch of stuff that was never published. And then a lot of it is like Mario decapitating Sonic. I'm not messing around. It really is. There was some really like gnarly violence. And you know what's actually fun about too? Well, I think it's fun. I'm sure those kids were whatever. But a lot of those kids would get republished often, and they got really clicky. Because obviously having the envelopes, I have the letters that were in a lot of those envelopes, and it was like, you published that girl again for the 3rd time in 3 months, and just like, they got really, I'm like, you're 9 years old. They got real defensive about getting published, and like, I'm better than them or whatever, but it wasn't about that most of the time. It was, if a 4-year-old drew an envelope, it's going to be taken into consideration versus someone who's like 20, and so like it wasn't just skill, but the envelope art honestly is it's all hard. It's not easy to find any of this stuff, but they never returned that art to children. Like with the commissioned art contractually, unless Nintendo paid extra to keep it, which they virtually never did, because again, it was about time and speed and cost, right? Doing this thing as cheaply as possible. They were contractually obligated to send all that work back to the artists, which is why 30 years later, I'm able to find so much of it. That's not the case with the envelope art at all. So it was just whatever that one person happened to find and take out of the building, that was what's left. I'll figure out how to bring the like Sonic decapitation stuff. That was pretty good. Yes.
With some of these things you acquire, do you have any legal hurdles you have to go through?
You notice I'm not selling an art book? Anybody notice I'm not selling an art book? Yeah, so bless them. Nintendo's idea of helping me is generally not suing me into the dirt, which is great. That's fine. That's but yeah. So there's a lot of even Nintendo. Actually, I was talking to someone earlier about this. Like, you also notice that they don't do like collected volumes. Like Nintendo is not putting out collected volumes of Nintendo Power, which by the showing in this room, I think probably would do pretty well if they put bound issues of Nintendo Power together. But you get into like the image rights are so weird for these pieces because it's like, yes, Nintendo owns the image rights to reproduce Mickey's Magical Quest cover, right? They certainly don't own the image rights to Mickey Mouse. So to republish that, you would then be talking about a collaboration between two of the most litigious entities on the planet. So that's why, like, you know, I'll never sell the shirt. Sorry, I know you guys really want the shirt. Not for sale. And that's why I, you know, when I built the nonprofit, it's the interactive art collection, nothing to do with Nintendo, right? So steering clear of that, I don't sell anything. Again, I make no money doing this. I am only hemorrhaging money doing this. Please help me. But that's like that's the rules I have to play by, right? Like, it's worth it to me to bring this art to all of you, to not make anything off of it. So yeah, usually it's generally around like all the legal hurdles are all about like around reproduction, around you know, image rights, that kind of thing. But again, if I'm literally just bringing it to you and going, look, here's a thing. So that's, you know, I play by the rules. I don't charge for my art show. Like, it's whatever the ticket price you guys pay. I don't even know what you paid to get in the show. And so, like, that's none of my business. And so, like, I would never do a show where, like, I would, like, be in, like doing a freestanding art show and charging you for it. I would never do that. Like, that's the kind of stuff. As long as I don't make any money, nobody cares. So, that's generally the legal hurdles. Yeah?
So you won't sell the shirt?
I won't sell the shirt.
Say you, like, donate it to me, and then I give you 20
I am gonna do more interactive art collection merch. It is a cool logo. It's my little robot head logo guy. So I'm happy to do interactive art collection stuff, but like, again, it's just not worth it. Like, because you know, again, I am happy to play by whatever rules I need to play by in order to bring you this art, and anything that's gonna threaten my ability to show this to you, I'm not gonna come anywhere near. Right.
Mine wasn't really a question, but so my question to you is, kind of like how you worked with Nintendo before, do you feel differently about Nintendo now versus back then, like the paths they've taken?
I have never worked for Nintendo. I know that freaks people out. I would have been 8 years old, by the way, when most of that art was drawn. But yeah, I worked around all over the game industry, never directly with Nintendo. When I was at Disney for 9 years, that was at a point where we were by volume, so this was the DS Wii generation, and it was by volume, we were the #1 publisher on Nintendo. Like, they sent us all Wiis because like we were just cranking them out. You know, I did 9 SKUs of Hannah Montana. I did every High School Musical game. My Moby Games is up to date if you guys wanted to see like what all the I almost said crappy Disney games. All of the Disney games that I did. Yeah, whatever. Put a roof over my kid's head. Oh my God. Yes.
Are you aware of anyone in Japan doing something similar to this? Like what you're doing?
No. Again, like, certainly not for Nintendo Power. Absolutely not for Nintendo Power. Because again, it was despite the fact that it was largely made in Japan for a really long time, it was never published in Japan. Tokuma Shoten was, so when they were decided to spin up the magazine, they were like, well, we really like the way that they're like Famitsu and all the Japanese publications are doing it. We really like that. Rather than like trying to recreate that ourselves, let's just have the people doing it do it. So they just brought on Tokuma Shoten, who was a significant manga publisher, which is that's how I get into these trouble where it's like, oh yeah, like, you know, I can't talk to Katsuya Terada who did like the Final Fantasy art, the Secret of Mana art, like the Legend of Zelda art, all that really iconic early Nintendo power. I literally can't talk to the guy. He's just too famous in Japan. But there is a little bit, like one of the challenges being, and that's why like I'm trying to build a lot of, not like advertising, but like be able to, like I'm doing a lot of like videos with like Japanese translation over them, you know, that kind of thing, so I can like, sort of easily show people what I'm doing, because that happens with American artists too. Like when I had like 3 pieces of art and I was like, can I have your art? Like that was a very difficult conversation versus like being able to be like, hey, look, I'm a museum, and this is, you know, showing it to people, show not tell. I think one of the issues I'm also managing or running into with Japanese artists is that there was, especially for, I can't, obviously all the stuff that I'm trying to get is 30 years plus old, so I can't really speak to like current Japanese culture or current Japanese artists, but artists of the time have this feeling of, this is Japanese art, it's for the Japanese, we're gonna keep it in Japan. And so that's why my Super Metroid conversation is a 3-year conversation and running. And so it's a very guarded community in Japan. So certainly I don't know anyone doing this for the magazine, because it didn't exist in Japan. But like that actually might even be a question for Frank and Kelsey now that I'm thinking about it. Just like history foundations in Japan, like at large, like I don't know. Yes?
Is there a particular one that got away, a piece of something that you were looking forward to, thought you had found, were eager to find, but then just like it eludes you to this day? Or...
all that Wendy Salvatore stuff broke my heart. Thankfully, most of the time, it's more of a case of like someone's not ready to let it go, or it's like, you know, again, it is what it is. It's been 30 years. I'm dealing with estates often too with a lot of these artists, right? And so like sometimes, like for instance, Dan McGowan's family has the Link's Awakening cover. It's with the owl on the sword, the gold cover, the issue 50 cover. I want it real bad. They also have the Empire Strikes Back cover with Yoda on it. I want it real bad. But I'm also not like, and you know, I'm not passing judgment on other people, other collectors, right? But ethically, I am not willing to be like, hey, give me your dead dad stuff, right? That's just not. And like one of his nephews has the owl and the sword like tattooed on his body, right? Really likes that art. So that conversation is, I want it real bad. But when the time comes, you know, if that time is never, if that stays in the family forever, fine. If the time comes, I am the best home for it. And you just kind of have to leave it at that. But yeah, that makes me cry. There's a couple things that I know where they are, and it's in the hands of other private collectors, which most of the time, as you imagine, like a lot of this is sweat equity. Like the value is not what I paid for it, right? Like you know, because especially as a museum, I can leverage like, look, I care about your legacy, right? Like people who care about their legacy, care about their work being shared, caring about you, like tends to not charge me an arm and a leg. Surprise, surprise. Once it's in a collector's hands, that's very different. Then it's, oh, I would like $250,000 for this cover, please. And I'm like, I've never paid over $5,000 for a cover. And so, but so like the map cover for the Link to the Past strategy guide, know where that is in a collector's hands. Makes me cry. The Super Metroid, so I have the Super Metroid strategy guide cover. There was also an issue cover of Samus, that was drawn by the same artist who did the cover for the game. Know where that is. I can't have it. Makes me cry. So there's much less of like less of a one that got away and more of just like a, oh, I didn't like get to that in time. Someone got to it first, or it's on some indiscriminate timeline where it may come to me someday, or it may not, and that's fine. Yeah.
How do you balance your game development career with collecting and presenting it?
The question was, how do I balance my game development career and my collecting? I've been in the game industry for 20 years, and like, I'm not like, do you know who I am? But like, at the same time, it's like, if you do anything for 20 years, you better be able to like work for the people you want to work for. You better be able to, you know, do what you want to do. Otherwise, like, sorry, but like, you might not be that great at what you do. So thankfully, I am able to work for organizations where I say, for instance, I'm currently employed by Bungie. When that conversation started, I was like, look, again, this is my life's work. I do this job so I can do that job. So if it's going to be a problem, you need to tell me right now. And that's fine, totally good, right? There have been times where I've had conversations that are like, we're not really comfortable with you moonlighting like that. Okay, I'll just go find someone who is fine with that. And Bungie was totally supportive. In fact, they've monetarily donated to the foundation. So, which is great. So yeah, it's just, you know, I would be in a very different place if I wasn't so far along in my day job career, but it really is just a matter of just working for people who believe in what you do. And honestly, like, it's not like I'm not gonna go work, even if I did work for a magazine publisher, they don't make magazines the way that they made Nintendo Power. So like, I can't even think of an instance where it would be like a true conflict of interest. I guess maybe if I worked for Nintendo, but like, I don't even know if I feel like that would be like too close to the source. Like, I don't know that I would have a lot of fun. Like, I was at Nickelodeon for a little while, worked on the Ninja Turtles, like the Ninja Turtles, have the Ninja Turtles tattooed all over my body. And it wasn't a comfortable situation for me. I actually had to move on because I couldn't make decisions in the best interest of the brand because I wanted it to be for me, and it wasn't for me. So yeah, there's a very long way of saying you just have to kind of work for people that believe in what you do. I think I got time for like 2 more. Yes, in the back.
Are there any notable pieces that are just like complete mysteries in terms of like where they are right now that you're still hoping will turn up?
So the question is whether or not there are pieces that are like complete mysteries that I'm hoping to find. Is that pretty good? Yeah. Okay. So I think a lot because people are like, oh, what is your grail? And I'm like, I have a room full of stuff that's one of one. Like, it's all my grail. Like, I used to say, oh, my grail is like the next thing that I find that I don't know exists today, right? Which is still true. But the clay sculptures for the Earthbound Strategy Guide, I would murder any one of you. Any one of you. So yeah, there would be that. I mean, all this stuff like, because a lot of the Japanese art, Katsuya Terada, I mentioned him before, amazing, amazing artist. Presumably, he has a lot of his work, but he's not talking to anybody. So I don't know for sure, but so all of his work, and like my lofty dream is to have at least one example of every artist who touched the magazine. I don't need everything. We've talked about that. I can't have everything, but I would love to have a piece from every one person. So that's really sort of probably my real grail is either having every piece for an issue, which actually I'm actually pretty close to on issue 44. It's the Mickey's Magical Quest cover. I have a lot of that work, and like a lot of that Mega Man work is from that issue. But I would love to have just one piece of everything. I think I see 15 seconds left, so I think we're probably good. I am in the museum all day. I guess I'm signing. I don't know. Like, am I signing? Does anyone know if I'm signing?
There's like a Blockbuster room, like through there, that they do signings, but.
Okay, cool. Then I'm signing directly after this. And then again, I'm in the museum the rest of the time. Thank you for making me feel like it was worth the 16-hour drive. This is intense. Before you all run away, can I just take a quick picture?
Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and to the right are the playlist of the Portland Retro 2022 and some other interesting videos. Thank you.